Now I'm delighted to be back here in Kappa in County Limerick with a very, very good friend of mine, Billy Maguire. And Billy has done so many comprehensive, informative interviews with the What Matters programme over the last 2.5 years since I've got to know him. And one thing that really is outstanding, that Billy Maguire is in Kappa, in the heart of West Limerick, near North Kerry. Over the road you can see the East Limerick. It's all here. And this man, Billy, as people have said, in America, in Ireland and abroad, that they never came across such comprehensive historical information that they never knew about. And I am only learning as I talk to this man, because I never knew about the 1918 32 county, 32 county election. So Billy, this is literally a wrap up, we'll call it, for 2021.
Well, you're very welcome here, John, and all your viewers and listeners. You know, we're enjoying to give the information.
Yes.
And before we always turn the sovereign seal or read our proclamation,
yes,
it's always the right and welfare of the sovereign Irish people. Mm-hmm. And that's what's so important. And look, you cannot understand why the IRB, you know, and it's come down to all those different Young Irelanders and Fenian Brotherhood, and then the Irish and Fenian Republican Brotherhood.
Yes.
And they're the ones who founded and funded the state.
Exactly.
And that's what, for the people. But it all goes back to 1155, when Pope Adrian IV gave Hibernia, which is Eire, to Henry II to build his empire.
Yes.
And we want to know, and this is what the crux of the whole matter is, what did Henry II and what did Henry VIII do to the Irish people? We're asking, we had we're told 6 and 8 million people.
Yes.
What happened to those 6 and 8 million people? That's the whole crux of the matter. That's the conflict with Britain. And all that land that was taken. And it was shocking to say that it was slavery, and that the Crown of England sold Irish people into slavery. And that has to be addressed. You know, we cannot go on. I'm doing the peace, reconciliation and prosperity program, founded by Pope Pius XII in 1950 here, after the Second World War. You know, Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty, correct, T.J. Kieran, the ambassador, and Delia Murphy, his wife, and my late father, Canon Cooper, and Brendan O'Regan, James O'Regan, his father, his other brother, Father Paddy O'Regan, Eamon Casey, Bishop Eamon Casey, all these people, and they were back, and there were the Russells, all these people, and a lot of people from Britain whose families had been saved as prisoners of war during the
Second World War.
You know, the Vatican was in crisis because of the war, and we had Pope Pius XII and Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty, who was an IRB man, they approached the sovereign Dáil Éireann government, and that's how it came about that they approached that, and that's how the Vatican. It was in total chaos, and they saved thousands of prisoners of war, all nationalities: British, Germans, Jews, French, American.
Yes.
You know, Unionists, Royalists, all, they didn't discriminate, and that's why that peace and I have been doing this since 1950, right? When I was anointed to do this and to keep it. And I cannot make any progress because we have to go back and find out what happened to those 6 and 8 million of our people that were given.
That's a very important point, Billy, because
that's the whole point.
That's the whole point. They were taken as slaves. Irish men and women and children were taken as slaves.
They went into it was Cromwell and Ireton.
Yes.
They were sent over to do the dirty work. Now, they've been doing it, was going and coming. all those estates that you see that were here
Yes.
were to feed the Crown Forces and the Royal Navy.
Now,
That's what it
I
about.
was corrected on that, Billy, by many listeners to your programmes. When I called it the famine,
There's no famine.
they said there was no famine.
There is no
They said
famine.
it was genocide.
That's what it is.
And that's a
It's
crime against
Holocaust.
humanity.
It was a Holocaust.
A Holocaust,
And
yes.
and I must congratulate Philip Lynch the other day for he studied this,
Yes.
and so has Chris Fogarty. But Chris Fogarty only started about what we call the famine.
Yes.
There was no famine. There was a potato blight, is what it was, and it was a potato failure. That's what it was.
Right.
There was plenty of beef, mutton, lamb, vegetables. There was all grain. There was all sorts of things here. You know, fish. We had probably the most fish in the world for the people, but it was taken from them to feed the Crown Forces and the Royal Navy, and it's very important. We cannot make progress. We do not want the Irish Republican Brotherhood. Do not want another the last 100 years. That conflict was about the 1918 32 county election, when King George V and the British government refused to recognise Dáil Éireann and claimed it as an illegal assembly, and sent in his Crown Forces to Dublin to execute and annihilate the sovereign Dáil Éireann government and all members of the
Now,
Irish.
this was after the 1918 32 county
election.
And that was called by the British government.
It was on the 14th of December 1918, Britain
Yes.
called that election. And on the 28th of December
Yes.
1918, 73 seats was won by IRB Sinn Féin.
But that was a majority then for the Irish people.
It was. And it was a 32 county All Ireland democratic election. And the Unionists got 25 seats, and there was 6 nationals.
Yes.
And there was 1 independent seat. But that was the mandate we were given to found and fund the state. And we have to go back then to the Unionists regard themselves as winning that 25 seats. They're entitled to Northern Ireland. That is not a democracy.
Yes.
And this is the conflict for the last 100 years. And you saw on the 6th of December this year, only a couple of weeks ago, and there was they were shouting about it. We saw the division of Ireland.
Yes.
And 26 and 6 counties.
Excuse me.
And we saw what was going on. But the Leinster House, we saw Leinster House, and we saw number 10 Downing Street, and we saw the treaty. There was no treaty ever signed between Ireland and Britain.
Mm.
It was that. How could you? When King George V declared Dáil Éireann to be an illegal assembly.
But that is a total contradiction then, because the people spoke in the election of 1918.
That's why I turned.
And then
the seal every year at the Mansion.
Yes.
And it was in the Manta. And RT came out at 1 o'clock and on the news and said it was an independent government. And Collins comes out in his own story, which you're going to read there. Collins said, as chairman of the provisional government, a provisional government is not an independent government. It's not a sovereign government.
It's like a temporary.
The sovereign government was the 21st of January 1919 by the will and wish of all the people of the 32 counties. That's the mandate the Irish Republican Brotherhood were given. And the Fenian Brotherhood is the sister organisation.
Correct.
And they're in America. And they're the ones that got all those factories and everything here for employment for our people.
And weren't we blessed that we had the factories there?
Well, if we hadn't
them
today, where would we be? We'd be starved. But the point I'm saying to you is that conflict in 1155 has to be sorted out. And when Pope Francis came here, I wrote to him and asked him to sort out the Bull of the Billater, that a donation of Ireland to the Crown of England. Yes.
But that wasn't an illegal act by
Pope
Adrian. Sure, what jurisdiction did he have in 1155 over Hibernia, which we now call Ireland?
He had none. And this is the point. It's a fraudulent document. And how could he? And then what did the Crown of England do with the 6 to 8 million people?
Yes.
They annihilated them, and brought in the plantation of Ulster and the plantation
that's where the
of
plantation
Ulster.
started.
That's
Yes.
where the plantation started. They brought in, I think, and Philip Lynch the other day said that he studied it very well, and he said we were down to 500,000 Irish people.
500.
And they brought in all the rest. But they brought them in, and those people that were left, the Irish people were left, were to work the estates, all those landlords' estates. That's what they were. And they were to feed the Crown Forces and the Royal Navy.
While the people in 1845 to 1847, Irish men
died of starvation.
Died of starvation. And you see, I think this is so important. And I'm glad you corrected me, and I'm glad the viewers corrected me. It was not a famine. It was genocide. It was murder.
It was a failure. That happened, and that can happen. But all the other food, the Irish people weren't entitled to. They wanted to annihilate.
That really makes me very angry.
Yeah, but what should make Irish people angry? What happened to the 6 and 8 million people? They don't teach history here. Nobody wants to talk about it. I cannot do the peace and reconciliation process until that is told to the people, and we can move on from there. And I have a letter written to the Crown of England, which we were going to send for the 6th of December, the 100th anniversary of the famous Free State. And we've decided to hold it until the 21st of which will be. And again, the Lord Mayor of Dublin won't allow the Irish Republican Brotherhood into the Mansion House. And that's Dublin City Council. They don't recognise the sovereignty.
Yes.
And I'm going to show you the medal, which I have, 1910.
Yes.
And that sovereign seal and air on that is what's on your passport. It's on your title deeds. It's on your taxi, your car, and it's on every license that has to have that to make it legal, valid, and bona fides.
And you see, this is the point.
Well, the only difference, John, is the number of strings. 12 strings is Dáil Éireann.
Yes.
And we've told anyone who wants to know, go into BillyMcGuire.com. We give it all the different numbers, the 5 to the 6. You know, the Garda Síochána 7, 8 strings.
It's all state body.
You'll see there. We'll show you Collins in a minute wearing. That's what they wore.
Yes.
But that goes back to 1155.
Yes.
And this is surely to God. And we're asking Pope Francis to sort out that bull laudability and what happened in 1155. He's going around the world to all these countries claiming, oh, you must have peace, you must have this. We want peace and reconciliation. And he's the only one that can tell us, and the Queen is the only one, what happened to the between 6 and 8 million people.
And this is what we're saying to the viewers today. Billy Maguire and his great people are saying, what happened to the 6 to 8 million Irish people that were sold into slavery?
Most of them were executed.
They were
executed. They went in the morning, into those hovels and just executed the people. And then they took the young people between 7 and 14 away and sold them. Nobody knew even where they went. They went to the West Indies. And that, you saw the statue being pulled down in Liverpool.
Yes.
He was one of the ones that sold the Irish people, those young people.
You see, this is what I'm saying. The statue being pulled down in the 21st century shows, Billy, one thing. The how would I say, the anger, the distrust of the British government, the Irish all over the world, millions of them.
70 million people we have on account of what happened. And who was responsible? The Pope, Adrian IV, and the Crown of England. They were the two responsible.
Right up to Henry VIII.
Right up to Henry VIII. They were responsible.
Yes.
For the Holocaust. It wasn't a famine. It was a Holocaust. And planting Ireland, the plantation of Munster and the plantation of Ulster. And I gave all those Vaughan's Hotel papers with the plantation of Ulster, Fermanagh.
Yes.
And what happened to the people there. That's how I know all this.
Yes.
And we know all this about the slavery of the Irish people worldwide because we were a seafaring family. And we would have seen that slavery going on all over the world. and you will go to Christopher Columbus there in a minute. I mean, slavery is not, and what I'm saying, if you don't stand up now and sort out that,
yes,
the Irish people are going to be brought into slavery. They won't be in chains,
yes,
but they'll be controlled some other way, and we're seeing it happening. We've saw it on the 4th of December of 2008,
yeah,
when the GAA, which was the backbone of our independence,
correct, yes.
took the sovereign seal and era off the medal. That was the foundation.
But sure, that was an absolute
They had no
disgraceful
right
insult
it's
to the Irish, the heritage of the Irish
treason.
people.
It is treason.
Yes.
And for Nicky Brennan, and we can show you there, and he admitted it himself recently in a radio program. They turned it into a corporation. But it's not only a corporation, because those corporations, I have no problems with corporations, provided they're accountable to the state, the sovereign government, and the sovereign people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, if they are, they're fine. But they don't want to be accountable to anybody. They want to just rob and plunder everything they have.
Well, you see,
they're
not Irish. They're not true Irish people then, if that's the case.
Unfortunately, some of them are. But this is our people. I'm talking about the welfare of our people.
Yes.
And you're sending your children into slavery and your grandchildren. And you're doing it yourself now. And ask the reason. That's why we have, if you haven't sovereignty, you're a slave. And you can be made a slave. That's the whole importance. You read that proclamation. It's all about sovereignty, sovereignty, sovereignty.
It is.
The land of Ireland belongs to the citizens of Ireland and to them alone. That you have some place to go to. Rather than be carted off. And they were chained in huge numbers together. Most of them didn't get it. I think they were sold, Philip said, for a fiver, and the girls were sold for more. And they were absolutely, that interview is up in Billy Maguire.
But Billy, the point I'm saying is this: the whole world rocked against Nazi Germany for taking 6 million Jews out of circulation. Yeah. I'm sorry for using the word circulation, but it's the only word I can think of. And burned them and annihilated them and put them into awful demonic concentration camps. And other minorities got the blast of that as well. But looking back
to what happened
beyond
to us,
that, Irish people were treated worse.
And the girls that were pregnant